Building the fantastic third-party model kit of the Kshatriya and trying to pose it for the review reminded me just how useless the arms seem to be. And while I had always thought of that as a flaw in the design that made posing any kits of it annoying, I realised while making the review that, while it is annoying, it's actually a symptom of the overall strength of the design, and has a very good reason in the story, which it serves well. The reason the arms feel useless is because any kind of handheld weaponry just looks ridiculous on the Kshatriya. Because the Kshatriya itself is designed perfectly in its entirety to be the weapon. Every part of it feels functional in a way more natural and realistic than your typical grunt or mobile suit that's actually trying to be gritty first and foremost. The design's extreme beauty and sleekness, despite being the opposite of those more boxy kind of angular designs that we usually associate with gritty realism, is actually more realistic. It's more like an F-22 or F-35 or any number of other modern jets. They're sleek and beautiful like a supercar, but their entire shape still feels exclusively functional and dangerous. And after building the kit, that's what I finally realised they really captured with the Kshatriya's design. Giving it handheld weaponry like a normal rifle just feels as redundant as us, like, holding a separate miniature set of legs and expecting them to help us move. Every part of it is already a weapon. It's covered in megaparticle cannons, pretty much everywhere, even though we unfortunately never get to see it firing a lot of them. The binders aren't just for show and a place to store the funnels and more of those mega beam cannons, but also maneuverability. More limbs for Ambak to allow it to move fluidly and gracefully in space without using and being weighed down by propellant, as well as defense. Who needs something as simple and limited as a handheld shield when you have a full cocoon of 4 surrounding you at all times? But they don't just serve for physical defense. The fact that they are permanently attached to the mobile suit, as well as their size and space, allows for more complicated internals and generators so that they can be equipped with eye fields for properly comprehensive defense from all kinds of weapons and ranges. The binders are able to fully fill the role of everything that a normal mobile suit's arms can do, and better, more completely and all at once, even having their own arms. But then, what are the actual arms for? I always thought they might kind of be the one flaw of the design. In reality, just there to fit the familiar humanoid design of a mobile suit and mechs in general, rather than any thematic reason. But there are a few good potential in-universe uses for them that I can think of though. First and foremost, Ambak. Sure, the binders do that, but more limbs, and ones even closer to the centre of gravity, aren't a bad thing, especially when they are a standard feature on every mobile suit. Presumably easier and cheaper to manufacture than the binders, why not throw on a pair of arms rather than skimping and cheaping out on an already expensive, fully kitted out mobile suit? They also allow the Kshatriya to still retain the one benefit of arms that the binders really can't: versatility. If need be, the Kshatriya can still use any standard equipment that might be required, and if a binder gets damaged or cut in half, they're a valuable redundancy, allowing it to still fight. If a specific mission calls for explosives, for example, the Kshatriya can still pick up a bazooka like any other mobile suit. It can still pick up a set of chain mines like the Kamphers, can still demolish or lay traps, all without any kind of special modification or compatibility required. In reality, I also think they would actually maybe be used for storage. There shouldn't be much mechanics or armour required as usual, and they're quite big and their primary use is versatility, so in real life I could actually kind of see the forearms just being hollowed out and used to store or equip anything that needs to be. A further extension of their versatility, basically. But, as we see in the anime, that still doesn't really leave them anything to do. So, if we wanted to change that and give them more functionality, which, for the sake of model kits and figures, I do, I think a more fitting design would have been for them to also be weapons in and of themselves, like the entire rest of the mobile suit. I think what suits it far more, and how I want to pose them for the model kit, is with some kind of weapon instead of hands. For a mecha story, they maybe weren't really willing to design such a main, important front and centre mobile suit without hands, and in universe it would also of course lose that versatility, but perhaps some kind of transformation could have bridged the gap. Either a mechanism allowing the hand to go into the forearms, swapping with the weapon, or, honestly, coolest of all, but most unrealistically, have the hands and fingers themselves transform into weapons, where all of the individual fingers come together to form a minigun or something. Unfortunately, designing them like that is just too impractical for the real-world purposes of the design. Trying to draw or animate all of the fingers moving and combining could take just too much work. Not to even mention trying to actually engineer that for any potential kits. But still, I do think some kind of fully integrated arm weapon is what it is missing. The repaired version from later in the series does of course actually have this, with one of the Unicorn's hyper beam javelins replacing the damaged arm, but that has the same problem as the beam sabers that it has always had, that it just doesn't look right as a close combat mobile suit, and especially not using those arms. The binders just get in the way of them actually being able to reach anything with a melee weapon. The idea of the arms doing anything in melee can feel silly to me when they have so little reach compared to the binders that they can't even really reach past the binders themselves at all. Melee possibilities would probably have been better handled by making the arms that are on the binders more articulated and fluid. And then the design could be a spinning ball of death in melee. In story though, the arms work absolutely perfectly just as they are. They serve to contrast with the later part of the series. The relative lack of focus on the limbs, while the binders steal the show, works perfectly alongside the later reveal of the Kshatriya repaired, that has lost more than half of their functionality, and has had a load of weapons jerry-rigged into the limbs. The graceful, fluid movement early in the story that makes it feel so amazing and above everything that it doesn't even need limbs to do its job, is contrasted with the later, more damaged and vulnerable version's desperate and improvised danger. One feels like a perfectly designed marvel of engineering, all gracefully working in perfect sync to perform a job that just happens to be that of a weapon, while the other, a machine specifically out to do whatever it can to kill you. Even if it means strapping an axe to its stump and using a beam Gatling gun as a peg leg. Even if it's falling apart, it is coming for you. It makes sense, then, for the arms to be useless early on, so as to emphasise the binders and the Kshatriya's unique grace and strengths as much as possible, before destroying it and having it lose pretty much all of those unique strengths and have to fight anyway out of desperation. It also serves to really set up and show the sheer strength of the titular unicorn when it defeats the Kshatriya. The Unicorn is ultimately a much more standard Gundam design in terms of basic shape and silhouette. So they can really show and get the audience to understand the Unicorn's overwhelming power by putting it against a more unusual mobile suit that doesn't even need to get anywhere near you in order to utterly annihilate you. It's extremely easy to get the audience to understand the strength of a mobile suit that can kill you with just sheer psychic power, which the Unicorn also actually has, which is another way the Kshatriya helps kind of set things up. The fact it doesn't even need its arms just makes it so obviously strong, so that when the Unicorn defeats it, we understand just how insane it is. Something which early on in the series, before the strengths of the Psycho Frame can really be fully revealed, could be a bit hard to give the audience an accurate feel of. They emphasise and talk about the sheer speed of the Unicorn, for example, very early on. It's how we're introduced to it. But how are we supposed to know just how fast it is, and how impressed we should be? Exactly how fast is other technology in the setting? How much difference exactly is there between the Unicorn and other mobile suits' speed? And how important and impactful even is a difference in speed? Well, we can easily understand how strong the Kshatriya is, with it easily defeating everything put in front of it, whether they have a load of boosters strapped on or can completely transform into a Wave Rider specifically for speed. So when the Unicorn comes crashing into the Kshatriya at full throttle, and even it can't escape the Unicorn, while we see the force and strain that puts it under, it's suddenly like, oh shit, the Unicorn really is fast. Suddenly, the Kshatriya does have to use its arms. Suddenly, there is a mobile suit right on top of it, so fast and strong that it can't escape. Now, it has to pull out the beam sabers and actually fight. Later in the story, once things have gone so far and gotten so crazy, the Kshatriya can serve to bring us back down to Earth, by reminding us just how strong it is in comparison to every normal, mass-produced machine, reminding us just how far above the baseline level of strength the Unicorns now are. Of course, even more so, the Kshatriya repaired serves to show the strength of its pilot. It benefits her character by showing that, no, she wasn't just being carried by the overwhelming technological advantage. She herself is also just insane. It's not her fault they lost, because even in this corpse of a mecha, she can clash with the Banshee. So, all in all, while it can be annoying for merchandising and make the Kshatriya's kits and figures feel like they're missing something, the lack of use for the arms perfectly fits its role in the story, and is probably a large part of what made us actually love the design in the first place. It's so much more obviously strong and cool, not even needing your arms to be a dangerous weapon, than it would be if it just didn't have them. Or if it did have arms that were weapons and were used and were needed. So, thank you so much for watching. It's been a while since I've watched parts of Unicorn, so it could probably go even deeper, but this was all just triggered by the amazing model kit just reminding me how bloody great the Kshatriya's design is. I just love the Kshatriya. What a great mobile suit and design. Thank you again. Until next time, bye.